All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into Buddhism.
Okay,
Specifically, we're going to look at all the different schools and what makes each of them unique.
that's good.
We'll be using a YouTube video as our guide from Psychodesk Education called simply Schools of Buddhism.
Okay.
And get this, we're going to unpack some pretty wild concepts.
Oh,
Like, how about achieving enlightenment through thunderbolt knowledge?
hmm.
That's Vajrayana Buddhism.
Interesting.
Or how about Zen Buddhism, where you're looking inward, but get this, without logical thought?
Okay, now I'm intrigued.
So let's dive right in. I think a lot of people get a little overwhelmed when they first start learning about Buddhism because there are so many terms
Right,
and
yeah.
so many different schools. But, it's important to remember that all schools of Buddhism share a common foundation.
Exactly.
It all starts with the Four Noble Truths:
Which are?
the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and of course, the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering.
And those are consistent across pretty much all schools of Buddhism.
Yeah, so essentially, regardless of which path you choose.
You're always trying to escape that cycle of suffering and rebirth, trying to reach nirvana.
Right, nirvana, but it sounds like each school has its own, unique map to actually get there.
Yeah, think of it like climbing a mountain.
Okay.
The summit, nirvana, that's the same for everybody, but there are all these different trails you can take to reach the top.
And each one has its own challenges and rewards along the way.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm picturing all these winding paths up mountains, so where should we start our exploration?
Well, how about we start with Theravada Buddhism?
Okay.
It's often considered the oldest
Really?
and the most traditional school.
Interesting.
You'll find it most commonly in Southeast Asian countries
Okay.
like Thailand, Sri Lanka, Burma, and their scriptures are primarily in the Pali language.
So location and language play a big role in shaping how each school evolved.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, Theravada really emphasizes sticking close to the original teachings of the Buddha,
Makes sense.
as preserved in the Pali Canon. So it's all about individual effort and rigorous self-discipline,
Wow.
if you want to picture it.
Okay.
Imagine a lone monk meditating in a cave, dedicating their life to achieving enlightenment just through intense focus and meditation.
Wow, that sounds intense.
That's the essence of the Theravada path.
It takes some serious dedication.
Yes.
It's like a solitary journey
Yeah.
where you're relying solely on your own inner strength, determination
Yes.
to reach that goal.
Exactly.
How does that contrast with the Mahayana school?
Well, Mahayana Buddhism, it's also known as the Great Vehicle. It takes a different approach.
Okay,
It's more common in East Asian countries
I see.
like China, Korea, and Japan. And their primary language is Sanskrit.
Got it.
Now, while they still very much believe in individual enlightenment, Mahayana introduces this really interesting concept,
Oh,
the bodhisattva.
Bodhisattva, what is that?
Okay, so picture this.
Okay,
You've reached the summit.
right,
You've achieved enlightenment.
right.
But you look back and you see all these other people,
Still climbing.
yeah, struggling on the path.
Oh, wow.
So a bodhisattva chooses to stay behind to help others reach the top, even delaying their own final liberation.
Wow.
They really embody compassion and selflessness. They become guides for others on the journey.
That's a pretty powerful concept.
It is.
Okay, let's switch gears now and talk about a school that's always been really interesting to me.
Which is?
Vajrayana Buddhism. I've heard whispers of something called thunderbolt knowledge. And, well, it sounds pretty intense.
Vajrayana, also known as Tibetan Buddhism, yeah, it definitely has a more mystical feel to it.
Okay.
It's found in Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan,
Okay.
and they place a huge importance on having a teacher or lama to guide you.
So it's less about the solitary practice and more about finding a mentor.
Exactly, and they incorporate some unique practices,
Right.
mandalas, mantras, and mudras.
Wait, hold on. Break those down for me.
Okay, so imagine a really brightly colored, intricate circular design.
Okay.
That's a mandala, used as a focal point for meditation and visualization.
Okay, I'm picturing that.
Now, think of chanting a sound or a phrase over and over.
A mantra.
Yes, exactly. Used to focus the mind and invoke certain energies.
Okay.
And mudras.
Yes.
Those are symbolic hand gestures, almost like a physical language
Wow.
used to channel those energies.
So it's almost like a multi-sensory approach to spiritual practice.
Right.
You're using visuals, sounds, physical movement.
Yes, it's like instead of climbing the mountain slowly, step by step, Vajrayana seeks to reach the summit super fast,
Oh, wow.
using these powerful techniques.
I see.
Hence the term thunderbolt knowledge.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, now, what about Zen Buddhism? This one has always kind of fascinated me, but it also seems a bit paradoxical.
Right.
Because how can you achieve enlightenment by not thinking?
Yeah, so Zen Buddhism, it's this blend of Indian and Chinese influences, and it's known for emphasizing direct experience and intuition over logic.
Interesting.
It's not so much about emptying your mind entirely,
Okay,
but quieting the constant chatter of thoughts,
I see.
allowing for a deeper awareness to emerge.
So it's about going beyond the limitations of our logical minds and tapping into a more intuitive way of knowing.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It's like if you're trying to understand the taste of an apple,
Okay.
Zen wouldn't tell you to read about it in a book.
Yeah.
It'd say, just take a bite, experience it directly.
Ah, that makes sense.
It's about letting go of intellectual analysis and opening yourself to a direct experience of reality.
So we often get so caught up in our heads
Yeah.
trying to analyze and dissect everything
Absolutely.
that we kind of forget to simply experience life as it unfolds.
You got it.
It's like Zen Buddhism is encouraging us to wake up from this dream of thinking and step into the vivid reality of the present moment.
That's a really beautiful way to put it.
So just to recap, we've got Theravada, the path of individual discipline and meditation, Mahayana, emphasizing compassion and helping others,
Yes.
Vajrayana, using powerful techniques to accelerate spiritual growth,
Right.
and Zen, which encourages us to look inward and experience reality directly.
Yes.
Each school offering a unique perspective on how to approach this journey of self-discovery.
It is quite a spectrum of approaches.
It is, but they all stem from the same core principles of Buddhism,
Right.
ultimately seeking to liberate us from suffering
Yes.
and guide us towards enlightenment.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how one philosophy can give rise to such diverse interpretations and practices.
It is.
It's like each school is a different facet of the same jewel,
Nice.
reflecting the light of wisdom in its own unique way.
I like that analogy.
So before we move on, I want to ask you, the listener, which of these paths speaks to you the most so far?
Good question.
Which approach resonates with your own values and aspirations? Just take a moment to reflect on that, and we'll pick up our exploration in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. I'm ready to go even deeper into these different schools of Buddhism.
Okay.
We've got the lay of the land,
Right.
but now I want to know more about the key figures, the concepts that really make each path unique.
That's a good next step. It'll help bring these schools to life a bit more.
Exactly.
Show how these abstract ideas actually play out.
So you mentioned before that Theravada Buddhism places a huge emphasis on self-discipline.
Right.
Are there any, particular figures who embody that ideal?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The figure of the Arhat is central to Theravada.
Arhat.
Yeah, think of the Arhat as someone who has reached enlightenment purely through their own efforts. They've extinguished all those negative mental states, greed, hatred, delusion,
Okay.
and escaped the cycle of suffering.
So they're like the ultimate self-made spiritual heroes. I bet there are some amazing stories about these arhats and their journeys.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that idea of the self-made path, it resonates with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
In our own lives, we all have moments where sheer grit and determination helped us overcome obstacles and achieve a goal.
Definitely. It's an inspiring concept.
It is.
Now, in contrast to the solitary focus of the Arhat,
Okay.
Mahayana Buddhism has this vast pantheon of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas.
Okay.
One of the most popular is Amitabha Buddha,
Amitabha, who's that?
the Buddha of infinite light.
Okay, I'm picturing like a radiant, all-encompassing light. Tell me more.
He resides in Sukhavati.
Sukhavati.
It's a pure land,
Yeah.
a kind of paradise.
Ah,
Those who call upon his name with sincere devotion
okay.
can be reborn in this pure land after death.
So it's a belief in like a realm of pure bliss and enlightenment
Yeah,
that's attainable through faith.
that's the idea.
It's a really interesting contrast to the Theravada emphasis on individual effort. It's like instead of forging your own path up the mountain,
Yeah.
there's this like guiding light,
Mm-hmm.
a helping hand along the way.
A beautiful way to describe it. And this concept of relying on the compassion and grace of Buddhas or Bodhisattvas, it's really core to Mahayana.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Now, when we were talking about Vajrayana Buddhism earlier,
Mm-hmm.
I was struck by those unique practices, the mandalas, the mantras, the mudras.
Right.
It all sounds very hands-on, almost mystical.
Yeah.
Are there any influential figures who are especially known for utilizing these techniques?
So Vajrayana places immense importance on the Lama.
The Lama.
Yeah, the spiritual teacher. They
Right.
see the Lama as like an embodiment of enlightenment.
I see.
Someone who can directly transmit those teachings and practices to their students.
So it sounds like having a trusted guide, someone who's been there and can navigate those like more esoteric practices, that would be essential.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the most famous lamas is Padmasambhava,
Padmasambhava.
also known as Guru Rinpoche.
Okay.
He's credited with bringing Vajrayana Buddhism to Tibet back in the 8th century.
Wow, way back.
And he established many of the lineages that continue to this day.
Wow, so he's like a pivotal figure in the development of Tibetan Buddhism.
Absolutely.
Now, what about Zen Buddhism?
Okay.
With all this talk of direct experience and intuition, are there any like central figures or deities in Zen practice?
Actually, Zen kind of downplays the emphasis on those external figures or deities.
Really?
It's more about finding the Buddha within.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's less about worshiping a particular figure
Okay.
and more about tapping into your own inherent potential for enlightenment.
I see.
However, there are certain figures who are revered as like exemplars of Zen practice.
Right.
One is Bodhidharma,
Bodhidharma.
the legendary Indian monk who brought Zen to China in the 6th century.
Wow. So even though Zen emphasizes looking inward,
Right.
there are still these historical figures who inspire and guide practitioners.
Yes, but they're seen more as guides and inspirations.
Then like objects of worship.
I see.
Zen wants you to find your own answers, to awaken to your own true nature.
Right.
Now, I think it's time we move beyond just these key figures.
Okay.
And we take a closer look at some of the core concepts that really distinguish these schools from each other.
Let's do it.
We already touched on the Bodhisattva ideal in Mahayana,
Right.
but there are other important distinctions. For example, how each school understands the nature of reality itself.
Oh, okay. I'm ready to dive into those deeper waters.
All right, let's start with Theravada Buddhism
Okay.
and their concept of anatta,
Anatta.
which means no self.
No self. What does that mean?
It asserts that there's no permanent, unchanging self or soul that continues from one lifetime to the next.
So it's challenging that like deeply ingrained idea that we have of, having a fixed eternal soul.
Exactly. Think of like a river constantly flowing, changing. Theravada sees the self like that river, a collection of impermanent physical and mental states,
Interesting.
constantly in flux.
It's a pretty radical idea.
It is.
It goes against, our usual way of thinking about ourselves as these like solid individual entities.
Yeah, and that leads to a different understanding of enlightenment.
How so?
In Theravada, it's about recognizing the illusion of this separate self
Okay.
and freeing yourself from clinging to that illusion.
So it's not about becoming something,
Right.
but rather unbecoming all the things that we mistakenly identify as me.
Exactly.
That's a really interesting perspective.
It is.
So how does that compare to the Mahayana view?
Mahayana, while they also understand anatta,
Okay.
they add another layer
Oh.
with the concept of sunyata,
Sunyata.
which means emptiness.
Emptiness. Okay, that sounds a little, empty.
Yeah, no, it can be a bit tricky to grasp.
Does that mean like nothing exists?
Not quite. Sunyata isn't about things literally being empty or non-existent. It's about recognizing that all things, including ourselves, lack a fixed, independent essence.
I see.
Think of like a clay pot.
Okay, a clay
It has a form,
Right.
but it's also empty space.
True.
It's defined by its boundaries, its relationship to the clay, the potter who made it.
So it's about recognizing the interdependent nature of all things.
Yes.
How everything is connected and constantly in flux.
Precisely. And this understanding of emptiness, it can be incredibly freeing.
How so?
It helps us let go of those rigid attachments.
Okay.
To see the world with more openness and compassion.
That's beautiful.
It is.
It reminds me of that saying, the cup must be empty to be filled.
Yeah, I like that.
Now, what about Vajrayana and Zen Buddhism?
Right.
Do they have any unique perspectives on the nature of reality?
Vajrayana, with its focus on those tantric practices,
Right.
sees reality as like a manifestation of pure awareness, almost like a luminous energy field.
Wow.
They use those powerful techniques, the mandalas, mantras, mudras, to transform those ordinary perceptions and experience that awareness directly.
So it's like using those practices to like peel back the layers of illusion and connect with the pure essence of reality.
Yeah, it's about seeing through that veil of ordinary perception and experiencing the world in a completely different way.
Sounds intense.
It can be.
Okay, what about Zen? We talked about how it emphasizes direct experience and intuition.
Right.
But how does that actually translate into their understanding of reality?
So Zen encourages us to simply see reality as it is, without all the filters of our thoughts and concepts and judgments. It's about quieting the mind, observing the present moment with clarity and openness, like a mirror reflecting whatever appears before it.
So it's about stripping away all those layers of interpretation.
Right.
And just being present with what is.
Exactly. Zen practice is about cultivating that state of mindfulness, that direct awareness in every aspect of life.
Wow, we've really journeyed to the heart of these different schools.
We have.
From the solitary discipline of the Arhat to the boundless compassion of the Bodhisattva, from the powerful techniques of Vajrayana to the direct experience of Zen.
Yes.
It's clear that Buddhism offers such a rich tapestry of paths to navigate the complexities of, well, just being human.
It does, and it's a reminder that there's no one right way to approach these teachings. It's about finding the path that resonates with your own heart and mind, the one that inspires you to grow and evolve.
This has been an amazing exploration so far.
It has.
But there's still so much to unpack. I'm curious how all this ancient wisdom can be applied to our modern lives.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
I think we're ready to bring it all together in the final part of our deep dive.
I agree. Stay tuned. In the final part, we'll explore how these seemingly disparate schools can actually offer some really valuable insights. For navigating the challenges and opportunities of modern life, we'll see how these ancient teachings can help us live with more awareness, compassion, and purpose in the world today.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Buddhism.
Glad to be back.
We've covered a lot of ground. The core principles, the 4 main schools.
Right.
We even dove deep into some of the key figures and concepts. But now I want to talk about how all this ancient wisdom can actually apply to our lives today.
Yeah, I think that's what people are really interested in.
Totally. It's fascinating how teachings that were developed, centuries ago can still be so relevant to the challenges we face today.
Absolutely. It feels like we're living in a time when a lot of people are searching for meaning, for connection, for ways to navigate all the chaos and uncertainty of the modern world.
And you know what I think one of the most powerful tools Buddhism offers is this idea of mindfulness.
Oh, definitely. Mindfulness is like woven throughout all the schools we've talked about.
It is.
And it's really just about paying attention to the present moment.
But this attitude of non-judgmental awareness.
I think a lot of people have heard about mindfulness these days, but it can still feel kind of abstract,
I get it.
Like, what does it actually look like to practice mindfulness in your daily life?
Okay, so picture this. You're walking down the street, lost in thought, maybe worrying about the future, replaying something from the past.
Happens all the time.
Mindfulness is about gently bringing your attention back to the present moment. Feeling your feet on the ground, noticing the sights and sounds around you. Even just becoming aware of your breath.
So it's like stepping out of that whirlwind of thoughts. And connecting with the physical reality of right here, right now.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, by cultivating this awareness, you actually create space between your thoughts and your reactions.
Interesting.
So instead of automatically getting swept away by like anger or anxiety, you can observe them with more clarity and choose how you want to respond. That makes a lot of sense. It's like hitting the pause button before reacting.
Exactly.
Giving yourself a moment to make a more conscious choice.
And the best part is you don't need to be sitting on a meditation cushion for hours to do this. You can incorporate mindfulness into everyday activities. Paying attention to the taste of your food while you're eating, really listening to someone when they're talking to you. Noticing the feeling of the water on your skin when you're taking a shower.
So it's like bringing that mindful awareness to even the most, mundane tasks. Transforming them into opportunities for practice.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more it just becomes like a natural way of being.
Like second nature.
You become less reactive, more present, more in tune with yourself and your surroundings.
I could see how that would be so valuable in our modern world.
Totally.
It's like an antidote to all the distractions and demands that are constantly pulling us in a million directions.
Absolutely. And another concept we've talked about that I think is really relevant is this idea of impermanence.
Impermanence, yeah. That's a big one. And I think it can be a little challenging to fully embrace.
It can.
Especially in a society that, really values stability and control.
Right. We get caught up in trying to hold on to things.
Yeah.
Keep everything just the way we want it.
But deep down, we know that's kind of an illusion, right?
It is. Change is the only constant.
Yeah.
And Buddhism teaches us that resisting this truth, clinging to the idea that things can stay the same forever, that's actually a major source of suffering.
So instead of trying to hold on to the sand,
yeah,
we need to learn to appreciate the beauty of the ever-shifting dunes.
I love that. Beautifully put.
Thanks.
Embracing impermanence isn't about becoming passive or giving up.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that change is inevitable and learning to flow with it.
Makes sense.
It's about cultivating flexibility, adaptability, resilience.
It's like learning to dance with life's changes.
Yes.
Instead of getting knocked down by them.
Exactly. And speaking of navigating these challenging experiences, I think the Buddhist emphasis on compassion is also so important.
It is. Compassion is at the heart of Buddhism.
Right, especially in Mahayana.
Right, with the bodhisattva ideal.
Exactly. But it's not just about, feeling sympathy for others.
Okay.
It's about taking action to alleviate suffering.
Right.
To make a positive difference in the world.
So it's about turning that feeling of empathy into concrete acts of kindness and service.
Exactly. And this can manifest in so many ways.
Right.
Volunteering your time, donating to a cause you care about,
right.
or even just offering a kind word to someone who's struggling.
Even those small acts of kindness can have a ripple effect, right?
They absolutely can. And in a world that often feels so divided and disconnected, compassion is this powerful force for connection and healing.
Totally.
It reminds us that we're all in this together, sharing this human experience with all its ups and downs.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening.
It has.
It's been incredible exploring these different paths, from the individual focus of Theravada to the expansive compassion of Mahayana, the powerful techniques of Vajrayana, and the direct experience of Zen.
It's amazing how much variety there is within this one tradition.
It is. And what's really striking to me is how all these teachings, while they're diverse in their approaches, they ultimately point towards a more mindful, compassionate, and meaningful way of life.
I think that's a great takeaway.
It is. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this question.
Okay.
What aspects of Buddhism really resonate with you? What practices or insights feel particularly relevant to your own life and the challenges you face?
It's a great question to ponder. And remember, the exploration doesn't end here.
It doesn't. This deep dive was really just a taste.
A starting point.
Of the vast wisdom that Buddhism has to offer.
So keep exploring, keep learning, keep practicing. And who knows what insights and transformations await you on the path ahead.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of Buddhism.
It was my pleasure.
And until next time, may you find peace, wisdom, and compassion on your journey